Hello everyone, welcome to Online Microbiology. I wanted to give you a quick overview of the course shell in Canvas so that you know where to find everything you need this semester. So let's go log into Canvas, and you'll see that the module or the course shell is set up in modules, and we'll go week by week, and these will pop open as we go through the semester. But before we get started, I want to point out that if you're in the home page view, you're going to get this to-do list over here, and you might be tempted to click on things before you've actually done the work that's required before you start this graded work. Anything that pops up here in the to-do list is something that's worth points, and once you start it, you can't restart it typically. So I would always recommend that students work from the modules view, because then you'll do things in the order that are required and you won't get distracted by that to-do list and do things out of order. So let's go in here and take a look at some things. Hopefully by the time you found this video, this is what we're doing here. Hopefully you've read the welcome message and the syllabus. We're going to talk about a few of those things, but realize we won't touch on everything that's in the syllabus, so make sure you go back and read that in detail before you take your syllabus quiz. This is the course schedule. Hopefully if you haven't done so already, please take a moment to print that out. We're going to use that as a map basically to walk through the semester. It's got everything you need for the whole semester on that one page. So I highly recommend that you print that out. So in fact, that's where we'll go next. I have it pulled up here on another tab so we can go through it together. So you can see how everything in the semester is laid out in weekly modules. And you'll see, first of all, you do have a syllabus quiz that's due this Friday, so hopefully you have not procrastinated too long. And this syllabus quiz does require Lockdown Browser. Make sure that even if you have that software on your computer from a previous semester, they update the link to that software every semester. So you have to download it fresh every semester for at least one class. So make sure that you can go in and download that software fresh when you go to take your syllabus quiz. That's the best way to do that, is just click on the quiz and pretend that you're going to start it, and then keep clicking until it gives you the page where it asks you to download the software, and that's where you would agree to do that new software, and that way it'll actually link up to this semester's course. Otherwise it will not work properly, so make sure you do that. But otherwise, how this is organized is we go through at least 2 chapters, in some cases more like 2.5. I've got these 2 chapters sort of blended, and just parts of those 2 chapters are going to be important. But we don't necessarily go in order, so make sure that you're following the schedule, and I'll show you how to find the links to these things. But hopefully you will read your textbook and then come in and listen to the narrated PowerPoint lectures. I will show you where to find those links. Once you've finished the lecture and reading the textbook, then you can come over and do the homework assignment that's associated with that in your Connect online homework. This typically will take about 30 minutes, so don't wait till the last minute to do these. And then move on to the next chapter, and then as you do these things, check them off as you've completed them, and that way you know that you have done them. And then when you go to take your weekly quiz, it will cover just those 2 chapters in that week. And so we'll talk about the 2 different kinds of labs here. The SmartBook labs are virtual labs that basically look like sort of a video game virtual laboratory environment that you walk in and use some equipment. And so this tutorial at the beginning of the semester is really important. It helps you kind of walk through the process of learning how to use the virtual assistant if you have questions. It shows you how to use some of the equipment. So for example, when you get into the actual labs further on, you have both a lab, which is following instructions and sort of reviewing different slides on the microscope, and then you will follow that up with a post-lab question assignment, which is kind of like a quiz. So the labs you can do over and over, and realize that if you skip a step somewhere along the way in the lab portion itself, you will lose some points. And so you have the opportunity up until the deadline. So for example, this lab is due on this date along with all these other things. Then you have the opportunity to go back and redo the lab until you get 100%. And then, so you have multiple tries on the lab itself, but the quiz or the post-lab questions, there is a one opportunity option there. So you want to make sure you're comfortable with the lab material before you go to take your post-lab questions. But so each lab is worth 30 points. So the lab itself is worth 20, and then the post-lab questions is worth another 10. So give yourself plenty of time so that you can redo that lab if you need to get all the points you can from those assignments. The tutorial is just a 10-point assignment, and there's no follow-up questions. So that's just to get you in there and get you familiar with the equipment, essentially. The first lab, what we call the unknown ID labs, these are going to be a series of basically unknowns, think of as patient samples. And so you've got 5 patients you're going to be following through the semester that are your unknowns. And for each week, you're basically going to be introduced to different clinical labs that we will then conduct on those 5 patient samples. And you will collect data throughout the semester that it all builds up to this lab practical exam. So this is an open book exam, and it basically uses all the data you collected all semester. And so each lab is basically a series of, so first you'll have some background material on the different clinical labs that you're doing that week, and then you'll be presented with some images of the lab results themselves, and you will interpret those and record them on a data sheet. And then you will go and take a follow-up quiz. And so sort of like the labs over here in the virtual lab, these ID labs are set that you can take them over and over until you get a 10 out of 10 up until the deadline, right? And so, which is really important, because if you're not getting a 10 out of 10, it means your data sheet is wrong. And it means when you go to do the final process in the lab practical exam of identifying those patient samples, then you won't have proper data to be working with. And so there's no way you can do well on this exam if you haven't been doing well along the way. So keep that in mind as you go to do these lab quizzes, that they are set to do over and over until you get 100% on them, so that you know your data is good moving forward. Okay, so don't procrastinate on those. This first one isn't due till the second week, because you actually need to learn some things in chapters both 2 and 3 in order to do this first ID lab. So this one won't even pop open until the second week. Otherwise, your discussion posts, you're going to see you have one each week typically. Or these first couple are just one for the week, and so the first one's really just introducing yourself. You've got a lot of other things to handle in the first week that are sort of housekeeping things, so I wanted to keep it simple. The second week, there's going to be some things involved in both chapters 2 and 3 that are sort of related to what you're learning in this lab, that are associated with this first post. And so this one, you're not going to actually interact with your classmates, or at least there's not a requirement there. But moving forward, you'll have your typical post information, and then comment or reply on one of your peers' information. And so this is where where I keep highlighting in the syllabus and elsewhere that do not rely on Canvas to give you every warning on due dates, because when you have a post and reply kind of assignment, each part is worth different points, but they're both tied to one grade in the grade book. And so unfortunately, Canvas doesn't give you the opportunity to just set 2 different deadlines for the same assignment. And so understand this is assigned to make sure that everybody has posted something for their peers to respond to. I have found that if there's not a separate deadline, everybody waits to the last minute, and then there's nothing for anybody to post to comment on, because nobody else has done the work early. So regardless, that's where your points are tied to that deadline. So don't rely on Canvas warning you. You need to be taking responsibility of making sure you've posted that first post before that deadline. So I've given it at least a couple of day window to make sure that everybody has something to reply to. And so let's see, we've talked about those. And so otherwise, the only in-person meeting will be our final exam. So you do have a comprehensive exam. Everything from chapter 1 through chapter 22 is fair game. I do have study guides, so we'll talk about how you kind of fine-tune or focus your studies. I'll show you where to find that information, but basically we'll have one in-person meeting on campus, and I have the times to be announced, but the two that I will definitely offer will be 3 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. on that Thursday of finals week. That 5:30 option is the very absolute last opportunity. If you have some conflict and you would like to try to take that test earlier than one of those two times, you're welcome to request it, and if I can accommodate it, I will. But please make sure you do that as soon as possible, and if I have someone request an earlier time, I'll offer that up to the whole group as well. But otherwise, everything is done on Canvas. Anything with this little asterisk is going to use that Lockdown Browser program. So let's go back to our Canvas shell, and I'll show you a few more things here. So here's just some general tips, and some of this is what we're talking about here, but there's a lot more detail in there. Your course materials for this class are inclusive access, meaning you have instant access, digital access to your materials. So please read the note here before you come over and click on your course materials. So this link here will disappear after the first 11 days because that's as long as you have to opt out of this opportunity for inclusive access. So read the information there. After that 11 days, this will disappear, and then the only link you will have to get to your course, your ebook. This is how you get to your ebook, is through the McGraw-Hill link. Otherwise, this tells you how to get in there and get started. This tells you basically how to navigate the program when you're trying to do those virtual labs and things. So these are important pieces of information if you'll take some time to review those so that you know how to find what you need. The lockdown browsers, so please read these guidelines. I know a lot of students on our campus have used this software before. But you may or may not have had strict guidelines like you do in this class. So please make sure you read those guidelines. I do review every video session for every student for every quiz. So please follow instructions if you want this to count. And then again, when you go to take your syllabus quiz, this is where you can get that link to actually download this semester's lockdown browser. Now, if you have if you're enrolled in anything else this semester and you've already done a fresh download, then you probably won't have to do this, but you should only have to do it in one class each semester. But that's the easiest place to get to it, is just go through there, and as you go to begin the quiz, it will give you the opportunity to download that fresh. Otherwise, there's just some general things here that you might want to address before you get started on the material. And so again, you have weekly modules. These will pop up. Typically they will pop up the last day of this week. The next week will pop up. So I open those up as I get them prepared. You have your study guide. So this actually is every chapter for the whole semester. So if you want to pull that document up once and print it out, or you'll have access to it with each week. And then you also have access to it by way of what I just call the key concepts, which are basically the bullet items from this study guide are in each relevant chapter. So we'll look at what those look like. But your discussion post link will always be here at the top. Make sure that you go in and subscribe to the to each weekly forum. So even if you're not ready to go in and post, if you subscribe, then every time your classmates post something, then that will pop up. And so again, as your weekly posts pop up, as those forums become available, you can go in and subscribe to them, and you'll get notified every time someone posts something. So that'll definitely become important as you move into those later weeks when we have something that you need to respond to a classmate. You'll know that there's something available to respond to in the first place. So go into each chapter folder, and you will find, so there again are the bullet items from that overall study guide. Then you'll want to make sure and read your textbook, and then here are the links to your PowerPoint narrated PowerPoints. And so realize some of these are going to be 15 minutes long, some of them are going to be an hour and a half long. So give yourself plenty of time. These are essentially reflect what we do in the classroom when I do this class on campus in person. And so you have these shouldn't replace the textbook, but they should help you focus in on the part of the textbook that you're expected to know before you take your quizzes. And since YouTube videos are hard to print, I've given you the access to the PowerPoint lecture slides if you like to take notes. And so also realize in a class like this, a science class, there are a lot of pictures. So I would not just print every one of those PowerPoint packets just as full page slides, or you're going to be wasting a lot of paper. So if you go in and set that on the six slides per page, or three slides notes page or something before you print, you'll save yourself some paper there. But and then when you are done studying that chapter and you're comfortable with these items that you're supposed to learn from that chapter, then you can go in and take or complete your homework. So you can access the homework links from either within the chapter folders, or you will see that I also have a link to that homework outside of the folder. So that, number one, so that we can use this checklist function. So no matter how you get to that homework, whether it's from within the folder or from out here, or by the way, if for any reason some of these, if a link is broken and it doesn't take you from there, you can go find your homework from the platform directly, but it's usually easier to do it from here. But no matter how you get to that homework, you'll have a little check mark once you complete it. So this can also help keep you on track, knowing that you've done the things that are due. And so then you just move on to the next chapter, and same thing. So everything's very structured, very organized, so that you know how to find everything. Once you've completed those things, and again, you'll see your weekly quiz. So in this case, you will not see this link here until you've done your syllabus quiz and you have a 10 out of 10. So again, make sure you follow instructions on that syllabus quiz. Even though it's just a syllabus quiz, it is basically asking you to demonstrate that you understand the requirements of doing any of these quizzes along the way. And so again, once you have 10 out of 10, this link will pop up for you. And then you have your lab. So that first week, this is your tutorial for that virtual lab in SmartBook. So one thing, let's go back to the schedule real quick. One thing, as I mentioned, your weekly modules will pop up as we go. The only thing, if you find yourself with extra time and you want to work ahead, the one thing you can work ahead on are going to be these the SmartBook labs. And I do that especially because they do take longer than some of the other items. So you can see here you can get to any of those labs just from this separate folder. Now I wouldn't recommend just jumping forward. A lot of these things are things you're going to learn about in the chapters along the way, but because they don't necessarily correlate exactly week by week, it is something you can work ahead on, and that way you don't fall behind. But most of the time students don't find themselves with a whole lot of extra time. But if you know for a fact that you're going to be super busy on a week in the future and you want to get that out of the way, you can do those at any time. So that's the only thing really you have access to work ahead of time if you find yourself with extra time, which again is not necessarily a common thing that I find. So let's see what else. We've done the discussion. So I do update your grades throughout the semester. I will try to get those updated week by week. When it comes to things like your weekly quizzes, even though it's not due until the end of the week, so again, you can kind of see here everything is due at the end of that week, which in this class is on a Monday, just the way I've got it broken out. If you're also in A&P2 this summer, you'll see everything in that class is due on Tuesdays. So I've got them shifted by a day to make sure you have deadlines that are spread out a little bit. But basically everything will open up for week 2 on the last day of the previous one. So even if you take this quiz, and by the way, these are open the whole week, so you could go in if you got your studies done on the 28th or 29th, you can go ahead and take that quiz and get it out of the way. So I always recommend everybody aim to get started on things at the front end of the week, and that way you're not running out of time. But just realize that the essay question associated with the weekly quiz is something I will be manually grading, and I won't do that until it has closed. So you can expect, if this is due on the 2nd, I have scheduled time to go in on the 3rd and grade those items. And same thing goes for things like your posts, right? I won't go in and grade those posts until the 17th. And so no matter when you take it, you can expect the grades will get posted after they are due. And then you'll have access to go back and look at the answers for that quiz before you move on. But again, I always highly recommend you start working at the front end of the week and give yourself plenty of time, and maybe go in on a daily basis and do 1 or 2 little items, and that way it doesn't feel overwhelming. The only way that students do poorly in an online class like this, especially a summer class that moves really fast, is if they postpone or procrastinate. So just don't procrastinate, and you'll work your way through the material and hopefully learn a little something along the way. So one thing I skipped over here, you will see that I do have some instructions on how to contact the instructor. And so the most important thing here, you'll see that I don't have the messaging function link here, because I do not want you to use the messaging function within Canvas. This is another way you can get to that inbox right there. This is not email. This is an internal messaging function that you can only use if you're inside of Canvas. If you need me to send you a file, or if we're trying to communicate in any way, if I pull this up from my email, it will not link properly. So always use your campus email, which, if you're in the from the portal view, of course this is how you get to your online course. Of course you can manage your favorites, you can put whichever one. I have the 3 key things that I use on a regular basis: how to get to my online courses, my campus email, and this is how I want you to communicate with me. So if you ever need to reach out, just go to the portal and use your campus email to send me a direct message, and that's how we can best communicate. Because otherwise, if you're coming through this messaging function, it has to get forwarded to me, and it doesn't come through until the end of the day. I check my email throughout the day, so if you have contacted me through email, then I will be able to respond in a timely manner. So don't be afraid to reach out. I'm here to help, and I hope everybody has a great semester. Thank you.